Good evening. Welcome to the show, y'all. I am running it today. My name is Michael Lane. I am the president of Liftport Group. Tom Olson is helping a friend out, so he is unavailable this evening. We've got a great guest. I'm really looking forward to our guest. We'll bring him on in a moment. As usual, we're going to talk about the news. Really, the big news of the week is Blue Origin. You know, they had a pretty big week, and we did talk about momentarily on Thursday, but it's worth talking about more. And with that, stick around. It should be a fun show. We're gonna talk data centers and space some more. There's some interesting controversy, and we've got a great guest to really bring his perspective to it. All right, and so with that, let's get this party started. Hey, y'all. So this show, as you know, is I hope you know. By the way, Tom always says that, but I do hope that you know that this show is sponsored by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. What is the center? We champion and strengthen emerging space startups and space adjacent enterprises worldwide through advocacy, access, and advisory. Our pitched events and world-class boot camps fortify startups to be better investor ready. A lot of our work, especially this podcast, is supported by our listeners and our fans like you. Please go to this CSCF, Center for Space Commerce and Finance, cscf.space/support. And click on that plain as day donate button. A little in the tip jar each month goes a long ways. We thank you very much. All right, and with that, I'm going to bring on my good friend Sean Key to join us in the news this afternoon.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, how's things?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's just a Monday. I'm trying to get loosened up and ready to fight the rest of the week.
Right on. Starting to gear up for the holiday. You got any plans for the holiday?
Oh, yeah. The missus had me. We decorated the house. So, I mean, the trees are up. The yard is lit up. We decorated our palm tree. We're getting in the mood. We're planning to go to the Disney Springs over the weekend and go shopping in a little bit. So, yeah, we're gearing up. The benefits of living in Florida.
Right. Well, the benefits of living in Washington State near Seattle is it is pitch dark at 5 o'clock in the evening. It has been raining for 4 days straight. I went for a drive over the weekend. That was pretty nice. It was kind of relaxing. It's kind of the only thing I did to relax over the weekend, but things are starting to gear up a bit for Liftport, so I'm kind of excited about that. And honestly, I don't really want the holidays. I kind of want to work straight through. So,
we got to get through them, though. And then business usually is back to business, ready to scrap and fight and get what we get.
Right. All right. Let's kind of jump into some of the news. The first thing I'm going to bring up isn't necessarily news. It is there's a, how do I show this? This is not the same as normal. Hold on.
Nope.
I'm bringing up the Ad Astra or Per Aspera.
Okay, I'll get it. Let me see if I can find it.
You don't have that. It's a little hard for me to show it, but I wanted to kind of point this out because the folks involved are kind of a big deal. Dan Golden has been behind the scenes of the space sector for, 25 years, maybe more than that. He was the NASA administrator for a long time. And he came up with a pretty interesting newsletter called Per Aspera. And it really goes into the details, his perspective, his thoughts, and other people's. There's actually quite a few other folks involved with this. This week it was, why aren't there asteroid mines? Where are they? What's going on? We haven't seen anything. We've been going around in circles for 25 years, meaning we're going, the International Space Station's been circling the world for 25 years. But what are we going to do going forward? And I just think it's a useful kind of reality check. I read it, I don't know, maybe not every single week, but pretty often. And there's a lot to it. So I'm just going to put a shout out there for Dan Golden's Per Aspera newsletter. I think it's really interesting, and they put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, I get it too. And yeah, it's a very insightful read. It gives a little bit of different perspective, especially from someone who's been at the helm of NASA at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very useful perspective to get a glimpse.
Yeah. One of the things that, he was a pretty controversial leader during his days. People either really loved him or really hated him. I was still coming into that industry. I was still really new. And so I didn't have a strong an opinion back then. But there's no doubt that he made a mark.
And that's one thing I've noticed when I step back into the industry after all those years away. There's some strong opinions in this industry. There's not much gray area. There's not.
No.
You don't really have the seasoned professionals where they're neutral, can walk both paths delicately. Right. And it's either you're in one camp or the other, and damn if you're in the other camp.
Right.
And I'm like that. That's helpful to a certain extent, but moving forward as we expand, that's going to be an old crowd.
We gotta balance that for sure. Space is purple, right? It's reds and blues. It's the hawks and the military folks, and it's the tree huggers and the environmentalists. And luckily, this industry does get along pretty well. Golden was definitely a polarizing person. To be honest, he was so much better than so much better than not having a NASA administrator, which is where we are right now. But also quite a bit better. I have a lot of frustration with the now retired Senator Bill Nelson, especially because he always insisted on being called Senator Bill Nelson when he was in fact the NASA administrator. Like the politics of it got to be a little overmuch.
Yeah.
So,
unfortunately, though, that's the nature of a government business.
Yeah.
It is, but that's by just. I mean, they're not for a for-profit organization. They're for the government's direction, and politics will dictate direction.
Yeah,
and it can change like the wind on a sail.
And it does. All right, let's move in to let's talk about this article from Seraphim and the biggest space fund. I thought there was some pretty interesting details in this article that I had not seen before. I've known about Seraphim for quite a while. I knew about them almost from day one. I got introduced to them very quickly. It's the Yahoo article.
I got it. I got it. I'll pull it up.
Cool. So I don't know. I don't know Mark Blogett at all. Never had any interactions with him, but I thought this was a really interesting article for Yahoo Finance to come out and try to figure out who these people are. So there were a couple things I thought were interesting. Um, One thing about Seraphim is that they have a very big footprint. They are in several cities in the US and several in Europe. Um, he's a British guy who just liked space. He didn't have any background in it. Um, so I think that was a really big deal that you can just get into this industry because you like it, and build one of the biggest portfolios. They have 147 space tech companies. I'm going to read this directly. Crucially for Blogget and his partners, it also helps to educate investors. In its portfolio of 147 space tech companies and led by defense startups, 7 have been valued at more than $1 billion, and only 3 have failed. The British firm's net asset value has surged to almost 259 million pounds. 259 million pounds. Seraphim Space runs 3 key venture funds, an accelerator focused on supporting startup companies to access finance, a private venture fund, while in 2021 they were the world's first publicly listed space tech fund. So I thought that was pretty interesting. They have a lot more companies in their portfolio than I expected, and a whole lot more money than I expected. So good for them. Yeah.
I agree. As you know, my concentration in college was finance. So, and it depends on how you structure your finances and what your target is. You know, if it's just strictly making money, guess what? You're going to go with defense funds. But if you're trying to shift the dynamics to a more commercial side, then you might be wanting to invest your money in something else. It depends, and it goes back to depends on what your mission is and your mission, vision, values as a company, and even an investment company. But yeah, good on them though.
Good on them, right? Yeah, he's looking at the next generation of space capability. It's game changing. We all know that. If you're bothering to watch this show, you already know that. But it's nice to see it like in mainstream media. Yahoo Finance pioneered some of the earliest finance media stuff out there. So I thought that was kind of cool. There was one other thing to look at. Oh, yeah. A decade after launching and witnessing the exponential growth, Blogget is acutely aware that Seraphim Space is, quote, part of the problem, unquote, when it comes to dealing with space junk. We are a financier of the large constellations, and we are adding to large debris problem in the space environment. If left unchecked, it could render space no longer commercially viable. So good that he knows that. Kind of wondering what he's doing about it.
Funny thing is when I originally worked for the space elevator back in 2006 and 2007, that was the first industry I thought had a viable shot with space debris management and mitigation. And because I'm not a big fan of tourism, I'm a little bit more bullish on it than I was back then.
Yeah,
but I'm still not a fan. I still think there's a lot of other things that have greater potential than tourism to really drive the economy.
Well, the debris problem is a problem, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yep.
So, I think the Earth elevator is unbuildable because it won for that reason. So we'll see. All right, so let's talk about another big network that's getting built, not funded by Seraphim. Amazon has rebranded what we used to know as the Kuiper system of satellites is now officially Amazon Leo. I wonder if that name change coincided with Blue's successful launch.
I'm pretty sure it did. I highly doubt they do things by accident.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think they did it by accident. So this doesn't say any more than we don't already know. They changed their name. All right, cool, neat, great. I thought Kuiper was a pretty cool name, but Amazon Leo's more on brand, so okay, fine. The mission is to bring fast, affordable broadband to communities that aren't well served by traditional internet providers. Well, that's great. Not really focusing on affordability the way that they used to. There was a talk about how many satellites. I thought they had maybe it was a different article. Well, in a different article, I think they were talking about 4,000 satellites going to the sky, which, a couple of years ago was a phenomenal number, and now it's like that makes sense, right? Like it's much more blasé than it used to be, right? Like 4,000 satellites used to be a big deal, and now SpaceX has 8,000 already and is building more. I think their official number is 30,000 satellites. They're going to do a pause when they hit 21,000 and then decide if they need the extra the extra 9,000. I think that's their number. So to have Amazon come along and it's like, we want 4. We're going to start with 4 and see what happens. All right, cool. Yeah. Any comments?
No, I don't know. It's just another run, another company trying to get into the market.
Yeah.
And that's the way I instinctively see it. I mean, there should be economic value if you want to invest into that, but right off the, just off the cuff, it's just another run company.
I kind of dig their.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It's kind of cool. That branding. It's pretty cool.
I kind of dig their logo, right? Like that's not something we usually talk about on our show, right? Intersection of space and money, but okay, that's a pretty good logo. The E is strangely reminiscent of Microsoft's Explorer and Microsoft's Edge, and since Amazon is downtown Seattle and Microsoft is downtown Redmond, I wonder if they share the designer. But yeah, I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good logo if you're incorporating it into the Amazon system. So yeah,
pretty sweet.
Yeah, it was they got a new website that's blatant about how it is prioritizing home and commercial internet services. It promotes the ability to make seamless video calls and stream 4K videos and handle your whole family's internet needs. All right, so it's another but it's cool that it's coming from space. So good on them. Fingers crossed. Hope that works because the world could use it. Okay. All right. Last article, and then we'll bring in our guest. But I do want to kind of spend some time with this one. There have been a lot of articles about Blue Origin this week.
And rightfully so.
To be honest, it caught me off guard. I didn't know they were going to do a landing attempt. I hadn't seen a word about that. Maybe I just missed it. But first of all, this picture is so pretty. It's so pretty. I mean, that is an engineering superpower. I gotta say, the 7 shock diamonds from 7 engines. Yeah, it just looks cool. I love this picture. I think I might keep it this one. So what do you want to say Say about what do you want to say about Blue?
Well, I'm glad they're finally coming along and matching pace with catching up with Elon and his crew. I mean, it's what we need.
Yeah,
we really needed two of those. We're going to have smaller size rockets there. What we need is ports. We need spaceports in a bad way.
We do. Yeah.
And there's some real estate development projects coming up that we need to get involved.
Yeah.
But anyway, for the coming up, a lot of people are interested in space for commercial reasons, and we're going to need the capacity to take things up. We need the capacity to bring some stuff back, and maybe and send things up to replace things that are not working anymore. So. And eventually, we might be able to get some people up there consistently for a length of time. However many humans went up in 1 year, what was it, 45?
Yeah.
Maybe have 45 people in space at one time to be our next milestone.
That's our goal, right? That's our target.
Yeah.
I love this first line. I'm going to read it directly. For decades, yes, literally decades, it's been easy to dismiss Blue Origin as a company brimming with potential, but rarely producing much of consequence. I had an intern here at Liftport about 2020, maybe 2021, and he was a fanboy of SpaceX and was completely unaware, did not know that Blue Origin was a space company. Now, in fairness, he's new to the industry and is from Korea. So, it's my job to kind of like expand the kid's horizons. But he was unaware and he was all fanboying out about SpaceX. And I'm like, yeah, the SpaceX engineering system is pretty good, right? Credit where it's due. But in 2020, it wasn't as superpowered as it is now. And Musk was not the richest man in the world. Bezos still was. And I'm like, look, don't count out Blue. But there are problems, right? Like, I've said it before on this show, gradatum ferociter, step-by-step ferociously. First of all, if you make your logo out of Latin or your tagline out of Latin, it's going to separate you from the public. So that they don't have fanboys at Blue. If you make your logo a tortoise, a turtle, it's gonna permeate through the culture, and it's okay to be slow. I understand what they're trying to do, but
do it right the first time. I get that. I think there's a place for both.
Yeah,
I still do. I still hold that because you can push fast, but eventually something bad will happen that will be catastrophic.
Yeah,
because you have enough iterations that will cause. You give it enough time, something bad will happen. Where if you push slow, that could take place decades from now.
There's rumor of people killing themselves at SpaceX over the pace and the expectations and obligations. I cannot confirm that. I'm not really one to kind of spread rumor, but I've heard it, and I'd love to know if it was true. Well, so there's a company culture there that's just so radically different than the stuff at Blue. But rooting for Blue is like rooting for your favorite home team because they're only 20 miles from me, 30 miles.
Right.
But it's like rooting for your home team that kind of sucks, right? You're still faithful to your team,
right?
But you want them to do better, and so this is them doing better.
Yeah. And I think they will do fine. Their pace is going to be different. Just going to have to be comfortable with it. But they'll be there.
The company is built. This is the quote. Hold on. hold on. This is the quote. The company has built hardware for well above a dozen flights in 2026 with an up of 24 launches. So pacing is the key at this point. How many can they manufacture? How fast? And does it all work? Yeah. Yeah. They're coming out. This is still quote. They're coming off the line at 1 a month right now. And then we're ramping up from there, he said. It would be ambitious to get to the upper limit, but we want to be hardware rich. So, we want to try to keep building as fast as we can. And then with practice, I think our launch cadence can go up. So that's their limit. 12 to 24 launches next year. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
They're not launching their current rocket that quickly. So that would be a pretty big change. That would be a pretty big departure, and it would be very cool to see them hit. I would be thrilled if they could get 1 a month up. If they can get 2 a month up, I think they would really shake things up.
And here's the other thing is that their business plan is around servicing the industry, whereas SpaceX, along with other companies that Elon has created and owns, it's really about going to Mars. The technology is targeting Mars. So, and I've said this before, I'll say it on camera now. If something happened to Elon, would that still be a viable option? I don't see it, because I look at what happened with Microsoft after Steve Jobs passed away. Tell me something that they have created since he's passed away that has changed the culture.
Yeah, I loved Paul Allen. That guy changed the face of Seattle really significantly. He brought AI to the city. He brought he enhanced biotech in the city. He died. His sister cratered his empire, sold off all of the assets that I cared about, and switch years. So yeah. Like Musk, loathe Musk. We want that guy to stick around. So
If anybody's going to make it to Mars, I think he's the one that's most likely to do it.
Well, and then Blue is specifically going to the moon, right? That's the thing I was really surprised about. They have a couple trips to the moon planned in 2026.
Well, you found your carrier. You find somebody to help you bring the gear up to set up the elevator.
Yep, exactly. All right, let's move on and bring on our guests. Rob, are you there? Let's see. Oh, Doug, I didn't see your comment. I was on a different screen. So this is important. Thanks, Dr. Plata. 45 tons partial reusable versus 100 tons fully reusable to orbit makes a significant difference when it comes to space and development. Yes, sir. 100% agree. I will literally take what I can get. Right. I know it's not the same. And, I do have a lot of confidence and hope for Starship. But this tells me that Blue is on the right path. I guess that's all I'm going to say. All right. Rob, let's bring you on, buddy. Hey.
How are you guys doing?
How's things?
Things are good. How are you guys?
Good. How's where are you? You're
I'm in upstate New York. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So yeah. I love to hide away in the woods.
Nice. Well, talk a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What's your backstory? What's your origin story? And then we'll get to what you're doing now.
Absolutely. And first, I want to comment on the SpaceX versus Blue thing, because it actually came up in 3 different conversations I had today. And at the end of the day, my co-founder, used to run product in Starlink, and I think she says it well. Where if you laid off the entire senior team of SpaceX, everyone would still know what the mission is. Everyone's on the same page and knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing and knows exactly what's going to happen. I think at Blue, it's not as clear. If you were suddenly to wipe out the entire senior leadership team, a new team would come in. I'd hope that they are as aligned on New Glenn and their future they're trying to build as much as, SpaceX is on Starship. And for the friends I have at SpaceX, I think they all know what they're doing, right? And they all, not only that, not saying Blue doesn't, but there's no mistaking that everyone's on the exact same path to reach the exact same goal at whatever means necessary, And I think that Blue, and because it was built by a lot of ex-primes engineers and senior execs, I think still has a little bit of that kind of like slow looking for government contracts and DoD direct funding. And I think, I want New Glenn to succeed, right? Anyone who, like you two, want to see a proliferation of humans in space, want to see Blue Origin to succeed. I digress. So.
No, that's cool. I mean, we talked sometimes on this show, soon to be, not yet quite, but soon to be Dr. Pete Gerritsen wrote a really good paper about the Starship singularity and how it's not just about Starship. It's this proliferation of lots of companies coming online, mimicking what Starship SpaceX has done. And now, there's 5 U.S. companies working on it. There's half a dozen in Europe, 2 or 3 in Asia. Yeah,
support companies that will come on for those companies, and then
right.
iteration down and down the line.
Driving ecosystem. That's what.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of launch is one of the biggest drivers to anything, right? I'm going to quote one of my good friends, Mike Grace, who runs Long Shot Space, doing kinetic launch of space, and he's talking a lot about, once you start getting down into like the $1,000 per kilogram to $100 per kilogram range of cost to launch, then some really funky things start to happen. Really, in terms of like, the stuff that made no sense before. Now becomes viable. Earth data centers in space still will not be viable, but we can save that for after the intro. My name is Rob Auchincloss. I'm the CEO of Equinaut, which is a recently founded startup focusing on alleviating a lot of the data issues that exist in space. My background and a little bit why I'm here, I actually met Michael back in 2014 at Space Access down in Phoenix, Arizona. Speaking of Blue, Rob was there. Rob Meyerson was there back then. Blue Origin was still an early, shell of what it is today. And there are a couple early SpaceX people there as well. And it was interesting because at that point in time, I hailed from Embry-Riddle. I was a quick drive down from Prescott, Arizona, and able to kind of really see, what is happening in this crazy space world. Because, at least Embry-Riddle, I think for a really good thing and a really bad thing, a lot of my professors were ex-defense primes, right? And I think some of them worked on amazing programs at the JP-58. My main advisor, Dr. Michael Fabian, was, head of liquid propulsion at the Air Force for 30 years. Just people that you can learn from that I could never get that experience from anywhere else. But also all the fun, crazy, exotic things that are really now at the forefront of like what people are investing in when it comes to the space startup world. No one talks about, right? And so I just want to first off thank you, Michael, for being one of those people that kind of showed me like there's this whole other world outside of like Raytheon, Lockheed, Northrop, Boeing that is really fun and playful. And thankfully, I took that path in life. Actually, after graduating at Embry-Riddle, I decided to go work in design. I worked for a design firm called Collins in New York City, focused mostly on building out branding systems and strategy around them, mostly because like I love the super technical left side brain I have, but I really want to build out this other side. And from there, honestly, I dove headfirst into startups because I love this idea that a couple people could potentially change the world with a crazy idea, and there are no rules, and you don't have to work your way up and put in your time, so to speak, and kind of just learn through the fire hose. spent a few years doing that, then started a company called Afocal. Afocal still exists today, and its main goal is basically to help launch early stage tech startups. A lot of the time we work with professors or industry individuals that have been kind of in their position for a very long time and help them take these ideas they have and turn them into very profitable, successful private companies. Worked across all industries at this point, a lot of space, a lot of energy, et cetera. The last few years I've been really paying attention to what's happening in the space world. I think there have been a lot of phenomenal ideas. I could spend an hour and a half highlighting the companies I think are really doing incredible work these days.
Right.
And, recently I saw this scourge about 4 or 5 months ago of people mostly proliferated from a World Economic Forum piece earlier this year that came out of the Davos of 2025 that hey, we're destroying all of these resources we have on Earth. We are running out of land, running out of energy, so let's put data centers in space. And that started this gold rush for a couple companies to come together and say, hey, let's throw up a bunch of NVIDIA N100s into orbit and see what happens. Right. I think I'm going to quote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I say, this has been widely regarded to be a bad idea. And so that really prompted myself and a few friends started thinking critically about, I think there is a reason why people do things. I personally like to believe in the good of people and believe that there's a reason that people want to go out and do things, right? I don't always want to assume that people are chasing money or a grant or some kind of international notoriety. And there are existing problems with data in space. And that's what prompted us to really think critically and think like, okay, what is the main problem that these people are trying to solve by putting data centers in space? Because I think that a lot of them had these really cool ideas and then they pivoted this idea of like, hey, let's put these, AWS-sized data centers in space because it's better for the environment. Like that's a terrible argument. Not to mention that we now know, after some numbers have been crunched the last few weeks, that just today the cost of putting a data center of equivalent size in orbit and just in LEO compared to Earth is 200x, right? Which is not feasible in any scale or form. And also, if that was your budget, I guarantee you for 2x, maybe 2.5x max, you could build the cleanest, most environmentally friendly, eco-conscious data center on the planet. So, what the founding of Equinaut really came from this idea of saying that, hey, I think data in space is a problem, right? I think a lot of people are looking at it the wrong way, right? I view it as a pipes and pumps problem. Data is a flow rate problem. It's a fluid, right? And most people view it as this very static thing. But when you think about it, especially from space, right? Every time we launch these satellites, they're islands. We have to launch them with their own power, their own food, their own water, equivalently, right? And so the way to think about it is saying, well, what if we could create a network system of software, hardware, and systems that combine together to be able to alleviate these data problems? And once you're able to do that, if you're able to do that, you can start to unlock a whole new series of really interesting other potentials. And that kind of brings you up to speed. So from when I met you, Michael, up until now, that's all of it. So I really appreciate you guys having me on. So
is it like a swarm that you're describing? Software, hardware. I'm trying to picture this in my head. I'm a visual.
Kind of. Yeah, for sure. So obviously we're very early stage and we're very stealth and secret about what we're doing. So some things I would love to just scream at the top of my lungs and tell you the cool things that we're working on. But obviously, my investors would then murder me in my sleep.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the way I see it is that for anyone listening that might not know a lot about satellites, which I doubt is, I think most people here probably know a lot about space, which I think is a really nice audience to talk to. And from my perspective, right, unless you're a defense prime or the DoD, who has near equivalent unlimited budget when it comes to building these satellites, even companies like Planet's like probably one of the largest Earth observation companies on the globe that's private, so to speak. They even have a lot of problems with bandwidth and latency and ground link, and ground stations. And there's a lot of work that can be done in that initial software layer to really help alleviate that by democratizing access to ground stations across the globe, right? That's kind of part one, right? Part two is the fact that hardware in space has really crept along and at a very slow speed and not matched the Moore's law that we follow here on Earth with teracompute, right? And so I don't think the software is really the problem. A lot of the software that we're talking about using is just very similar to what a normal data center would use here on Earth. Obviously, there's some very key distinctions in that entire stack. But from a hardware perspective, there are a couple companies that have cropped up in the last few years. I'm going to highlight one in particular named Colossus Compute based in Oakland. And their idea was quite simple. They said, the average satellite, smaller satellite, is launching with ARM chips in the late 90s, early 2000s. Right? What if we took modern AMD NVIDIA chips and then made them work in space, right? I'm not talking about just like throwing a chip on there with some rad hardening. It's like completely rethinking what a space compute stack needs to be. Because as a lot of you do know listening, when you're putting together a space system, could be a spacecraft, could be a satellite, could be a space station, doesn't matter what it is, you're usually conglomerating, unless you're SpaceX, components from thousands of manufacturers.
Right. You've got all these supplier networks, yep.
It's a mess, right? And they all have different standards and distinctions and systems and languages and
TRL 7s, 8s, 9s, which means it's at least 4, 5, 10 years behind current tech.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I just see Doug's question I want to answer. So he says, please clarify, distinguish between data centers, AI training, AWS, edge computing when it comes to what people are talking about and doing in space, right? Are people confusing what is coming in LEO? I think there's a yes and a no, right? I think the people that wrote that original report, I can't remember if it was World Economic Forum or World Bank. It was one of those large international organizations. Or maybe it was a video from a commentary. I don't remember what it was. But
it was World Economic Forum, and Philip definitely got himself planted into that article. Like he used his connections to make sure that his voice got heard. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You're talking about Phil Johnson, CEO of Star Club, right? And so, from that, like, let me just kind of distinguish a couple things. Edge computing in space exists already at a very small scale, and there are a couple companies working at edge compute in space. And for those people who don't know what I'm saying by edge compute, the idea is like, instead of bringing the data down from orbit to Earth to compute on Earth, which is what 99.9% of people and operations these days, it is computing that data in space and then bringing down that reduced data load to Earth, which means that your flow rate effectively decreases from what it used to be. Therefore, you can bring more down, right? When it comes to, there are a couple companies that have recently talked about this idea of, hey, what's the biggest problem with data centers on Earth? It's a land, it's a heat problem. Well, space is cold, right? And that's like a very low, I'm going to say this in a loving way, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs way of thinking about space, right? It's like space is cold. It's like, yes, space is cold, but also like the amount of, let's call it friction in space available to actually make things colder is a fraction of what we have on Earth. And so to answer your question directly, I think that the average person may confuse what they're doing, but there are a few companies that are actually genuine scientists, engineers, ex-NASA, Y Combinator, whatever fancy words you want to throw at it, that are genuinely thinking about putting Earth data centers into orbit. And that's not a joke. That's not a ConkSat post. Although ConkSat, if anyone's familiar with the hilarious, amazing kind of gag satirical LinkedIn page, posted yesterday about how they're raising a $45 billion fund to put an AI trading center on Pluto because it's the coldest of the planets in the solar system, which is amazing because the amount of people that were actually like in the green space, like celebrating this, like I'm so glad that people are fighting Elon Musk. So I digress. I know it wasn't exactly an answer, but yes. So going back to what we were saying, if you're able to solve the compute problem and you're able to bring this level, even a fraction, even let's just say 10% of modern Earth computing needs to space, it would be an incredible improvement of what we have now on average, right? But you don't solve the secondary problem, and that secondary problem is, what about all the satellites that are already up there, right? And so the idea is quite simple. What if you had a series of satellites in space with really good hardware and really good software that could really be that communication layer between existing satellites, the ground, compute capabilities, et cetera, then you start to solve a lot of these resultant problems that can really, as one could imagine, start to move things along. And so if you talk about this from I think Sean disappeared. If you talk about this from a like step 1, 2, 3 perspective, step 1 is getting back to this idea of saying, let's just solve the problems we have now, right? I'm thankful enough to have a couple friends who work deep in the Earth observation world. And there's a lot of really incredible things we can learn about this planet, the problems that we have facing this planet, climate change, migration, deforestation, weather pattern changes, even weather pattern predictions, like knowing when a hurricane is going, knowing it's going to kill a certain community or it's all about early warning and prevention, right? So let's fix that problem now, because actually we collect way more data in space right now than we have ever the ability to process, have the ability to actually collect and do anything with, right? So that's the first problem I want to solve. Second problem I want to solve is understand there are a lot of satellites in space talking about, debris and having less shit up there, excuse my French. We could theoretically extend the life stage of existing spacecraft by allowing them to access the next generation compute and communication abilities while also understanding and being able to communicate with past generation spacecraft, right? And that's kind of the second hurdle, which becomes if you solve the first, you kind of solve the second, and the other ones come up. The third is the interesting one, right? It's like everyone from Elon to Jeff to Zuck talks about how they want to build robots to build out space stations, space bases, moon bases. And they say they're going to do it with robots, right? Robots are pretty cool. I like robots. To those people who don't understand robots require a lot of data and connectivity. And there is no way anything we're building the next decade or decade and a half can come close to being able to run an army of Tesla bots on the moon. It's just not possible. Are there companies building to that point? Absolutely. And there are a lot of people that are doing really interesting work, like Astroscale in Texas is one of them. I think that's the name of the dog. Yeah. But yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Sean, because I think it comes really down to like this idea of like having the ability to sell. And also from my perspective, it's like, I think most companies nowadays want to develop their own product and own their own product and be like, it's only us and our product. I don't view things that way. I'd rather say like, hey, we're going to save the top 10% of performance for ourselves and our spacecraft to create a service. But the one right below it, we'll happily sell to you to place in your satellite. Because why wouldn't we do that?
Right. So if you kind of place this in kind of context here, you've got StarCloud that's trying to build Connex boxes and shipping containers style spacecraft that are islands, as you just described them, that plug into this mammoth system. Let's just, I'm not throwing anybody under a bus here. Let's assume it works, right? So that's one, right? That's one. I have a lot of skepticism, but let's just kind of go with assume it works, right? If they succeed, they're not just going to change space stuff. They will have transformed the solar panel production industry of the world, right? Because
right.
Like they're building, what was it? 6
kilometer by 6 kilometer. The first gen is 6 by 6 kilometers, which is something that let me just pause you for a second. I'm going to take the non-space approach to this. And first off, like I got to say, like, I'm very congrats to the StarCloud team for recently launching in space. And I think the work that they're doing is important because it lays the foundation for everything else to happen. I personally think they're going to pivot sometime in the next few years into something, because I think that data centers in space are an eventuality, but I think they're for space. I just don't see the point in like ever putting an Earth data center on for Earth in space, right? But I digress. But let's think about it from this, like, I'm a naturalist. I live out here in upstate New York because I love nature. I love the trees. I love looking at the clean sky. An object that big, you'll be able to see at sunrise, sunset, and at night very easily. right?
Every day. Yep. All the time.
I'm even slightly, or like, look at your telescope, annoyed by the many Starlinks blinking around the sky. I couldn't imagine having a gigantic object in space. It reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns builds a satellite that blocks the sun's rays so he could turn on his power plant even during the day and charge the city electricity 24/7. Kind of reminds me of that,
Right.
Yeah. So to your point, what this unlocks, what this does, right? I think people don't fully grasp, the need for having systems like this in space, the need for data in space. Think about all of a sudden, like how we do anything we do without cellular, without GPS, without Wi-Fi, bandwidth, fiber, Ethernet, any of those things. Imagine how much harder it suddenly becomes to do literally anything we do on a day-to-day basis, right? Even have this conversation right now.
Yeah.
And that's the reality that, minus maybe a landline telephone. Let's give them that. Or maybe a Morse code flashlight with the night. That's basically what satellites have now, right? If we're being honest, compared to what is possible. And I just think that if you are able to have the connectivity that is possible with having connections like this, then you will be able to unlock a whole new era of really funky, cool ideas, just like lowering the cost of launch unlocks a whole new era of other things, right? If you could do 1,000 kilograms or even $100 a kilogram to orbit, the need for a Starship booster, like fuel tanker, becomes obsolete. So you can just kind of launch things you can launch fuel into orbit, cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But I also do believe that, like, to bring you back to my friend Mike Grace, this might be a hot take. I don't think $10 per kilogram is achievable using traditional launch means. It's not. I don't think it's ever going to be possible using rockets, unless you are literally, like, the entire world economy becomes making rockets, and the cost of scale just drops significantly. We need kinetic launch or something else.
I don't think that's going to happen, right?
Yeah, but it looks like that. I mean, if you take just a layman's point of view, and then I wrote a paper about this, or article about this a while back, is that, with IT's interest in going to space, and which we do need, they have deep pockets and they can make the investments. I think there's going to be a lot of discoveries that come along that's going to benefit. I do not think the big I am a skeptic of the big container data centers. I do like the idea of a swarm, and yes, most of it's going to be for space.
Yeah.
But what we're unlocking is a central nervous system, a global central nervous system, is what we're really doing, and we're building it. I mean, pretty much. I mean, this is all of a sudden it's starting to become a hive.
Yeah. It is, and I think that we want to be people that are not only making the components that allow anyone to do this, but also be making the system that enables more of it to exist. Because, I think if you ask anyone at Starlink right now how they feel about Amazon Leo, now recently renamed, as you guys aforementioned in this podcast, they want it to exist. The more these exist, the better competition there is. I one of my dear friends who will remain nameless is on the human factors team at SpaceX, and I can promise you that no one is more disappointed about Starliner not working than the SpaceX Dragon team, because they wanted to use those Dragons for other fun things. They didn't want to have to fix Boeing's problems, right? And I think that's what space is like space is getting, I don't know if you guys feel this right now, but especially in the startup space community, there's this feeling of community right now, right? It's not as much as like other, you look at finance or you look at biotech, it's like all cutthroat, like art of war, Sun Tzu, everyone's trying to fight each other. And I think space is getting back to this like global cooperative thing that it should go back to. And that's what I want. Like I want StarCloud to succeed. I hope that in something slightly different, right? And other people like, Sophia Space and others to do well. Because the more of these that exist, to your point, Sean, you're able to do so much more, right? Because what I think about is that, I went to high school starting in 2008, right? I'm 31 now. So at the end of the day, I couldn't have dreamed of being able to launch and work on a small sat when I was in high school. It was just too expensive, right?
Right.
At Embry-Riddle, when I was in college 4 years later, that was like the beginning bleeding edge where like the top aerospace schools were getting money and funding from the government, from NASA, from the school, from private donors to be able to launch a small CubeSat. But it's still a multi-million-dollar project, you know? And I think that we're getting to this point where you can have young kids in America, especially, that think space is really cool and want to go work on it. But unlike the original like space imagination, inspiration phase of the 60s and 70s and 80s, now kids can actually go out and build something that can go into space, right? And be part of something that can go into space. And that's what interests me the most, right? Is this idea that saying like, hey, the more of a connected network we can build, the easier it becomes people to get into space, the more people are able to get into space, and the lower rung tiers of ideas, which are ironically, there are a lot of like nonprofits and NGOs that have interest of building their own satellites to track a hyper specific data set that most people don't even think is important, but it could radically revolutionize a whole new area of intelligence for humanity, right? Yeah. And that's what I'm interested in. Right, is like proliferation of mankind on this planet and beyond through learning more about our planet from space. That's it. That's all I care about.
That's it. That's enough. All right. So with our last 4 minutes here, what does the next 5 years look like, and what does the next 25 years look like, especially for Equinox? Right. Remember that we're really a show about the intersection of money and space. So talk about that a little bit too. But 5 years and 25 years. Go.
So a report came out a couple weeks ago saying that 43,000 satellites are going to be launched into LEO in the next decade. I think that's actually I think that's an underappreciated number, and also I think it's going to be much higher than that. I think SpaceX alone will launch more than 43,000 satellites in the next decade into space. And so we have this mass amount of money coming into the market. I will tell you that of the investors that I've talked to for Equinox, a lot of them, this was and will be their first investment in space tech. There are people that are slowly coming from other areas, biotechnologies, financials, and coming into the space because they understand that like it is a driving force that is anything. And the first person who's like, oh, well, bio part of space, go talk to Varda, right? I'm sure Delian would be happy to tell you about the pharmaceuticals they're developing with their kick-ass capsules in space that are revolutionizing that whole industry, right? So I digress. 5 years from now, I think if we're successful, and if you guys are successful, you will have the ability in space to access some level of connectivity and compute in space that anyone can do. Almost like an AWS, I can log on right now with my laptop and join. 25, and I think that at that point, it creates a whole new economy that doesn't exist yet. That's why like us doing TAM research was so hard, because it's just like you're estimating something that you hope exists in the future potential reality, right? If that 5 year kind of projection is there, you're going to have whole new industries cropping up and pivots of existing industries that I couldn't even begin to imagine what they look like now, but I can tell you there's a lot of money flowing into them, right? Secondarily, between that 5 and 25 year point, things start to get really spicy. What I mean by spicy in terms of like these ideas that everyone has been talking about for a long time, I think, Michael, what you're doing at Liftport is a good example, start to become even more of a reality with the lowered cost of launch, with compute in space, all these crazy awesome things happening. We're 25 years from now, I think that this race to the moon, I was at a conference, the Payload Space Conference at NASA Houston a couple weeks ago. Everyone's talking about helium-3 in the moon. That's all everyone in that like, really? Intuitive Machines, NASA, Lunar Outpost, it's all they want to talk about. Interloon, Rob Myerson's new company. So I think that there's going to be so many resources pointed towards the moon. I think it's reasonable within 25 years that there is some kind of a connected infrastructure system on the moon, because none of these systems, robotics or things, are going to work and or operate without some kind of connectivity from the moon that is linking the moon and L1 and the Earth, right? It's so obvious. Anyone who is a big believer of any level of science fiction or aerospace engineering or physics or even philosophy can see it coming. I would love to be part of that personally. I would love to do whatever I can to help, because I am someone that genuinely believes that, like, if we can figure nuclear fusion out, helium-3 is very helpful to get to that point in time, and we won't be arguing about, energy needs for data centers on Earth for our AI overlords, it wouldn't be a problem at that point, right? So we're talking about a giant circle, right? Let's go finish the circle, and then it'll kind of complete itself. Because then at the end of the day, like, the data center in space from Earth makes no sense when you have fusion on Earth. Like, it genuinely breaks down at that point. beyond any chance of being repaired. And that's it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Good luck with your
Thank
new
you both for having
company.
me. Appreciate it.
Love to have you back on, and keep us posted, right? You know, the show's called The Unknown Quantity because we try to catch things on the early edge, and we want to see what's happening next. So right on.
Yeah,
Thanks
totally. And look, anyone I talk to in the show, reach out to me. I'll always talk to anyone. So
right on.
Have a great night.
Appreciate
Bye.
it. All right, y'all. Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Dr. Plata, always great having your insight here. Thank you very much. We've got a great show on Thursday. We were supposed to have Dallas Beanhoff last week, but he was ill, so he was rescheduled for Thursday. And a couple pretty interesting guests coming up in the following weeks as well. We will be taking a bit of a break on Thanksgiving and also Christmas and New Year's. Our shows kind of fall on some inconvenient dates, but thanks very much. We'll see you Thursday. Bye-bye, y'all.